Welcome to Gold Derby's Q&A panel on the making of Upload. Today, I am delighted to introduce some of the artists working behind the scenes to bring this show to life. Please join me in welcoming creator, writer, and executive producer, Greg Daniels, costume designer, Farnaz Khaki-Sadigh, editor, David Rogers, and last but certainly not least, writer, Maxwell Vivian. Everyone, I binged through season one very quickly, and it feels like a lifetime ago. And I got to the end and thought, what on earth could they possibly come up with to expand on this world that they created for this really ambitious and unique show? Season two came along and smashed through it really quickly, and I was immediately transfixed once again on these characters and this story. It didn't disappoint. So I'd like to know what you each thought about season two in terms of what you were hoping to achieve and whether that you got the outcome you wanted. I'll go to you first, Greg.
Sure. Well, I also want to point out that Maxwell is sort of like the head writer and was an on-set producer last year too. So he was there all masked up and behind a plastic shield like 24/7. So we, yeah, I think we got what we wanted. I mean, we had to shut down maybe 3 times for COVID, and we at one point we sort of made a decision about like we had gotten a really good episode 7, and maybe we shouldn't push it, and so there is a I think we ended the season on a high point, and it's very, we're almost done writing season 3. So Maxwell and I have been on Zooms like nonstop for the last 4 months, and at least, right? And season 2 is going to roll very nicely into season 3. That's all I'll say.
Cool. What about you, Maxwell? What did you? And by the way, I did have you written down as a producer. I just didn't say it.
No worries.
How did you feel about season 2? Were you happy with the way it turned out? Did it meet your expectations?
I was overjoyed with the way season 2 turned out. Honestly, it's so hard. It's hard to look at it in terms of like, did we get what we wanted when we were producing it at such a crazy time? Like, we were writing in the room when COVID first hit, and we switched right over to Zoom and just like didn't lose a beat, just kept writing. And when things were first going down, I was one of the people that was like, oh, it's about to be Mad Max times. Like, let's just keep writing and we'll keep getting paid, and we can buy some gold and have something to barter during the end times. So like, that was taking focus. And then when it came time to shoot it, it was like, productions were kind of going back in up in Vancouver, but not really in LA. And it was like, are we even going to be able to do this? And we did. And we went up there. The show already shot up there, but we went up there, everyone masked up, everyone getting tested 5 days a week, all that kind of stuff, and plowed through it, and really didn't have to make too many compromises to get, what was on the page. So yeah, I was overjoyed with how it turned out.
What about you, David? How did you feel about how season 2 turned out?
I feel like these guys haven't answered the question. They've been skirting around and talking about the production in season 3. But yeah, no, I thought season 2 was great. What you said about, finishing season 1 and the whole world that Greg had created, and how it all came together with the, the scripts and the actors. And it's like, what do we do next? And, just, even how we ended, season 1, what the launching into season 2 with Ingrid, the relationship between Ingrid and Nathan, Nora's on the run and gone. And I thought all of those storylines really, came together in such a nice way, really coalesced. And, while still keeping all the, the satire and the tech jokes and the futuristic things. And, so, I was thrilled. There were episodes like Dinner Party where we've got, we show all of these, the AI guy, played by Owen Daniels, just having a whole dinner party with like, 12 of him doing things, and just all the little VFX, changing outfits, straightening pictures, things like that. These elements that we brought in, and even, I love what was set up in the first episode of the season was Nathan searching for Nora. We've got Nora out in the woods, a completely different atmosphere. We introduced the Luds, and then we've got Nathan, doing this high-tech search for her, throwing things up and looking at her social media and unlocking things and trying to find out where is she? So, I thought all that was great. And, the new things that we introduced to the world, like stealing gigs from people to give to the poor, the whole Robin Hood story, things like that. I mean, Greg, you can comment on this stuff.
Yes, we will. Yeah, no, we'll definitely dive more into that stuff because that's what I love the most. And
Maxwell wrote that episode, so that might be.
Yeah,
good.
I know. Yeah,
ask him about.
We'll definitely dive into that one. Farnaz, you're one of the main department heads who is in charge of the look and feel of the show. And so when season 2 was done and dusted, after creating so much of the costume work for season 1, were you happy with the outcome on season 2?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it was a huge challenge doing season 2 in the midst of COVID, just because we didn't have a lot of the liberties that we did in season 1 in getting and procuring like clothing and crew and, fitting schedules, and just, it was really quite different working on season 2 and then in comparison to season 1. So going through all of the challenges of season 2 and trying to get through all of everything that we needed and actually getting access to everything because of COVID and shipping and availability of everything. It was really nice to kind of see it at the end and see like, wow, it came together and it looks amazing. And I was very happy with the final product, just with, what we had to go through to get there. So
yeah, as you should be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's incredible that it looks so seamless given the amount of blood, sweat and tears that goes on behind the scenes. I want to go back a little bit in time. Greg, you once revealed that you came up with this concept because you were contemplating about how our lives are so digitized, and what if we could just upload ourselves into the afterlife, so to speak, and if we did, we'd probably screw it up. I love that. So true. Talk me through the genesis of the idea and how it kind of morphed into the upload we know today.
Sure. Well, it started off, it was a very science fiction idea about, and it was a really long time ago. So people were talking about digitizing their music libraries for like iPods or anything. And I was trying to come up with a sketch idea and exaggerate that. What else could you digitize? If you digitized yourself, all your memories, and you put them in some kind of a video game, then we could design this video game and it could be an ongoing thing forever. And it would basically be mankind making its own heaven, which I thought was very rich as an idea in terms of, it would be heaven, but there wouldn't be that justice element in it because it would be all run for profit, and all of the greedy decisions that people make in current society would be reflected in whatever the digital world is that they created for people. So I was like, it's not necessarily funny, like a sketch, but it's really cool. So, I was developing it for a long time. I thought I'd make a book out of it. And the thing that really kind of cracked open the humor for me was my kids. One of my kids was playing this game, Club Penguin, where you're a little penguin and you live in a little igloo, and you have to build out your igloo, and you actually have to buy stuff to outfit your igloo. And they came up to me and they wanted me to approve like 99 cents so they could put a television in their igloo. And I was like, oh, that's what it's going to be, right? If you are digitized, the companies are just going to be soaking you every minute, And so that opened up this whole sort of comedy of advertising and in-app purchases. And I started to realize that it felt a little bit to me like Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, where there's this big industrial revolution and he gets sucked into the gears of this thing and he has to sort of live there. And, I'm probably butchering that storyline, but it's a really cool image. So I was like, all right, so Nathan is just living in this screen world that we're all interacting with constantly, but he doesn't get to come out and come back to the real world, and what is that like? And what's it like if you fell in love with someone who was in a different plane of existence, and how could you keep that going? And
Yeah.
that'd be better in some ways. Yeah. So I mean, it's a great concept, but as it's being
but the comedy
interpreted by
moments,
so many talented people.
but the comedy moments, like you just said, they're in a relationship, and how does that? And then we introduced the hug suit, and it was so great that in season 1 when Ingrid goes to rent it, and it's this disgusting thing with these textile, and Greg designed this. I mean, he worked with Farnaz and costumes and everybody, and to design this thing of what it would look like. And I
Farnaz had to sew all the little condoms on the inside, right?
I remember there was what
did you do today? I sewed condoms. Yeah.
I guess they're rubber gloves, maybe. How did you make that, Farnaz?
We actually had to make a rig then, and we dipped it in latex and created sheets with of I think it was a foot by a foot of sheets of these kind of finger tentacle condom things, and then we had to seam every sheet together to create the inside of that. So it was a whole process.
Yeah, I feel
that was one of the most outrageous things I've seen. Just horrifying, but in a great way.
It's one of the most outrageous things. Sorry, David, but it was one of the most outrageous things I've ever had to build. So to this day.
But when you see that kind of thing, on a Star Trek show or something, they just, we need a textile, someone just puts on a suit and that's it. But for us to get into okay, how does this really function, and what's the, and like I said, when Ingrid goes to rent it and they're cleaning them and you can see the hair and a Band-Aid and stuff. I mean, it's just gross. And she storms out the first time when, to get this. And I just thought those were just real comedy elements of if this was going to happen, this,
it's a very hard,
way,
I think it's a very hard show for Farnaz and for the production design team, because there's so many additional things you're laying onto it, right? So they have to, they obviously have to be in character for all of the characters' clothing and props and et cetera, but then they also have to do it in the future. And then that's a whole layer of how do you change everything that you would do for today and make it in the future, but then it's not in the future in a cool way. It's in the future in a lame comedy way often. So that's a third, whole layer that they have to consider.
Yeah, it's so different. There's nothing really quite like it. And you could have done a really dark dystopian futuristic tale about a digitized heaven, but this is so much better because it feels so grounded in reality, even though it's kind of ridiculous, and because of these little nuances and details that us fans really pay attention to. Maxwell, we touched on this a little earlier when David was talking. The season really leans into this social inequality and socioeconomic disparity in a really sophisticated way. I was so glad that the show was able to tackle this, not only with the Ludds, but with the episode you're credited as writing just on your own, and that's the Robin Hood episode, where Nathan's siphoning bandwidth for the 2 gigs. That is brilliant. It is such a great idea. Can you talk me through the genesis of that idea, and and how it kind of eventuated into this really beautiful script?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll talk about the Ludds for a second first, because I think that that's where we really tried to show that there was people were living a very different way in this society. And I remember when we first started having conversations about them, the references Greg were using were very highbrow in terms of they're these revolutionaries living up in the mountains or whatever. And we really leaned hard into that in the early outlines and the early drafts and stuff. And then, I think you can look at that and you're okay, this is way too serious. But once you start peeling that away, you still have kind of the core of the idea remains, and really colors what's left in there. So it's you kind of get that commentary, and then you still get, you add in that upload humor there, where everything's not so dark and serious and things like that. And in terms of my episode, I don't remember where the initial idea for Nathan to start stealing gigs came from, but we knew that, he was kind of trapped in a situation. Nora still wasn't back yet. He had this device that allowed him to, kind of hack the code of Lakeview. And it's well, what's he going to do with it? And the way that the character has grown, we're like, okay, he's going to try and do something good for other people because that's the kind of guy he is now. And then we kind of looked at Robin Hood and tried to like map the beats of Robin Hood onto it. And like, at the end of Robin Hood, it's like, oh, there's like a big archery match or like a big joust or something like that. And it was like, all right, well, we're not going to do that, obviously. So it became a poker game that turned out really fun. I'm not a poker player, but like when I was writing my script, I had this little they're like poker hand simulators where you can pick people at the table and you're like, all right, this guy has this guy has this guy has this. And I was like, all right, I have to make sure every poker hand makes sense. What everyone's doing makes sense. I'm learning how the action works around the table and all those sorts of things. And then, you see the cut and you see the cards like 3 times, but I was happy for the learning experience of doing all that. And, I'm sure somewhere out there, someone was watching like a hawk to make sure it all made sense. So
I think so. You would have heard about it.
Right, exactly. Reddit knows. Reddit's watching.
Exactly. It just goes to show that there's the endless possibilities that you have on this show to really explore some really outrageous stuff and stuff that's also quite grounded. The idea of having 2 gigs, underneath the underclass. We kind of have that here, obviously. Depending what plan you're on with your phone, as simple as that, or it could be people who are living in abject poverty. And I love how you guys were able to bring that into this fun show without bashing us over the head. It's just something that I really appreciated from this season. So really well done. So moving on, because unfortunately, we don't have all day. I could keep you here all day, but I won't. So David, Upload is arguably gender bending, and it tonally shifts between broad comedy and slapstick, particularly, for example, in that dinner party scene which is what you mentioned, to heartfelt drama sometimes, high concept sci-fi. It's got it all. So as the editor, does that present unique opportunities for you to ensure that you're getting the tone just right?
Yeah, it's what's exciting for me about the show. Is getting to play, with special effects.
Dave's also a director, by the way. He directs in the first season. Yeah.
Yeah. But Zenner, like I kind of oversee all of the editing and post, and I work with Greg, constantly with the effects department and things like that, just, refining stuff. But going back, like that's the thing with this really crosses all genres because it's got comedy. Sometimes it's broad, sometimes it's satire. We've got romance, we've got, sci-fi, we've got mystery, and even we've got, a touch of gore here and there, when a character's head explodes or a pigeon's head explodes, things like that. We have this kind of like, the real dark sense of humor that shows up. But it's about finding the tone. Usually I think, the writers and the directors, on set with the actors, they kind of know, hey, this is the scene, this is a romance scene, or this is a comedy scene, and even within that, there's drama, there's comedy within drama, but it's, I don't find it too hard to find what the tone is. And then with any kind of comedy editing, I think the editor's job is to kind of find the comedy and sometimes even create it. You add a reaction shot, you're shaping it and manipulating, the footage to serve the story the best way. And, that's the thing, even with VFX, there's so many things we can do when we were showing the prototypes for the first time, and Munthers is showing, we went through all these kind of like, well, what should the babies look like? And, Greg can talk about this, how we went for these like kind of weird dolls and just kind of to put like Owen's, the AI guys, a baby face on it and things like that.
Yeah, I think we were on version like 43, the one that we ended up with that was the visual effects that we had the most versions on, and all of them were super funny. We did research. We do a lot of research on the show, and mostly it's research about tech that's coming down the pike, or sort of, issues of unintended consequences that big tech companies are doing. Something we do like a lot of research on that just to be satiric. But in this case, we found out about this subculture of people who buy incredibly realistic baby dolls and dress them up, and it's very weird. So
it is very weird. Yeah, as soon as I saw that, I recall that I know someone who knows someone, you know, everyone kind of has one of those people in their lives. Those babies are terrifying. And the way that you were able
Yeah.
to bring that to life was
Yeah.
unsettling.
It's troubling that they have genitalia on them. Such detail.
That is quite troubling, but it's so typical. It's just perfect for your show. Yeah, I just think it really fits into the genre. So, Farnaz, we talked about the neoprene condom suit, the sex suit, the hug suit, whatever you want to call it. Horrifying yet hilarious, which could be the tagline sometimes for an upload episode in the best possible way. But what I'm really fascinated about with costume designers on, shall we say, contemporary shows, this is a future show, but it still has a lot of contemporary elements to it. That's the hardest thing for a costume designer, from what I know from speaking to them, because you don't get to just design all these massive, expansive costumes. You have to be very nuanced with the way you're supporting the story. Is that the primary challenge for designing on a, shall we say, contemporary series?
Yeah, I mean, especially for this one, because it's contemporary, but it's not quite contemporary because we are technically like 15 years into the future with the show. So there's so many like subtle things that we do to try and kind of like make it a bit different than what everybody wears today, to just make it stand out a little bit more. You know, like Greg said, like we do a lot of research, like even on our end, like I have to do a lot of research in terms of what could possibly come down the pipeline in 15 years in terms of like materials, styles, cuts, you know, technology of like fabric and clothing, and technology in terms of like reusing and recycling, and then how does the environment kind of like affect what we're going to wear in 15 years, because, you know, like with global warming, you know, and the direction that we're headed, like right now, it's a lot of those things to kind of factor in, and there's a lot of like you know, references to that in the show, and there's a lot of subtle
privacy
hints.
fabrics, you know, with all of the Face ID,
yeah,
you know, closed circuit TV everywhere. We did, you know, we were very affected by protests in Hong Kong during the writing of that season, and I don't know if you remember that. It's a you know, it's probably 2020 now, but a lot of the people protesting had interesting fabrics to defeat the Face ID cameras. And so like in the first episode of season 2, Nora puts on this hood that has all these faces on it. So just in case they're driving along, the cameras don't know what to look at.
Yeah. That's the kind of detail that I think is really fascinating, because a lot of that will go over the audience's head. We're just so immersed in the story, but it's those beautiful nuances that I think really gives the show an extra dimension. Maxwell, I think, you know, as a head writer and service producer, I was wondering what you think about this. My view is the heart of the show is obviously this relationship between Nathan and Nora, and it really grounds it. As you know, that bond is quite strong. It was built over season 1, and for the whole of season 2, I'm hoping for them to come together. Is it important in the writer's room, if you can recall back to when you were breaking down season 2, to stay somewhat focused on that core relationship to anchor the show with those two leads?
Yeah, always. Because I mean, everyone on the show is great, but I at least believe that relationship is the center of it. And I remember when we were plotting out the season, just looking at episodes, we were like, all right, when are they going to be back together? And it was like, some people were like, it's too late. You know, it's too late. They don't meet until episode 4. Like, people are going to turn off their TVs. It's too late. And then we were like, okay, but he sees someone else in her avatar earlier. So do we get like another 2 episodes if we do that? Like, and we can just push it a little bit further and things like that. But the reality is, like, you want to see them together. You want to see them going through stuff together. You want to see them happy.
Yeah, you really do. And Greg, do you agree? Like, that's the core of the show. There's so much going on, but that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I think so. That's the spine of it. That's what we always have thought. And the concept, you drives so much of it, because once you get a for-profit heaven, for instance, then you know your themes are going to be inequality and, you know, certain satiric things, capitalism, you know, humor about advertising, et cetera. But also when you get an ability for someone who's died to still communicate with and talk to a living person, you get a very charged, intense, sort of poignant love story there. Because I think, you know, underlying all human love stories is the notion that somebody could die and that would be, you know, but people would still be in love with them. And, you know, what is like, that's sort of buried, I think, in the bones of it. And the idea that they can have this successful love story that transcends that is very, I think, emotional for people.
Absolutely. And that's actually quite universal, because you're right. That adds an extra element, an emotional element to the show. Sticking with you, Greg, you've got something like 20 Emmy nominations. I think you've won 4 so far. You're best known for, you know, some of the greatest workplace comedies ever, in addition to your work on SNL and The Simpsons and, of course, King of the Hill, like the American version of The Office, Parks and Rec, Space Force. And now Upload has some hallmarks of that interpersonal dynamic that we all suffer through in the workplace. So what attracts you to making the seemingly mundane work life that we all have to put up with so funny and so relatable?
Well, you just said relatable. I mean, that's the thing, right? People can relate to these grounded, realistic scenes of sitting at a desk next to your coworker at a call center. So even though it's set in the future and it's got this huge sci-fi premise, the actual workplace in the Horizon building, you know, and Dave worked on The Office with me the whole time. And so we, you know, we're seeing lots of fun beats that we kind of remember, or that, you know, are tonally similar. And likewise, the Jim and Pam romance was, to me, the core of The Office for a large part of it. And, you know, after The Office was over and I turned to this to be my next project, one of the things that I wanted to bring to life was something that was a very intense romance, but also intense in these other genre ways, you know. So there would be also like a mystery that had you leaning forward, and, you know, some very visual comedy that was, you know, more cinematic than The Office.
Yeah. David, obviously Greg just mentioned your work on The Office. You've won 2 Emmys out of 5 nominations for editing. You're also an accomplished director, and you're probably even doing craft services at this point, because you're pretty much an all-rounder. I'm just kidding. That's my attempt at
Craft services.
Craft service at one point.
Philly cheesesteaks.
Yes. Oh, let's talk about that offline. That sounds good. What would you say you most valued or learned from your time on The Office, was so acclaimed, that you were able to apply to your work on this show, which is quite different, but yes, it still has quite a lot of the same tonal elements?
Oh, I mean, I just think, you know, it's just tone. It's like, you know, and a lot of this comes from Greg. I mean, it's just this, you know, tone, this grounded reality, even in ridiculousness, and like just the, you know, the characters. Like on The Office, you know, you had these things that were so subtle, and I think on Upload we have the same kind of thing. Amidst all the craziness, I mean, we have these things like a mind frisk, or people's dreams are being, you know, sold. You know, this comes to that corporate kind of greed thing. But in the, you know, what comes down to it is just, you know, these characters that are really grounded in reality. So everything else, nothing seems so crazy or so broad or anything like that. You know, that's really what the actors, the characters are really what grounds the show. And I think there's a lot of, you know, like tonally, there's a lot of similarities, you know, from The Office to Upload. I mean, I think Greg can attest to that too. Just with,
you know what's funny about, we try to be grounded, right? And we're trying to imagine these futuristic circumstances with great detail and specificity and realism. And what ends up happening is that we imagine something and then it turns out to actually happen in the real world right after we've built it or, or put it on. So like, I don't know, there's so many examples, but
we send things to each other. Like I told Greg, remember I sent you that email about like the drugstores that they, instead of having the windows now for like refrigerated things, they have screens to like that show everything. But sometimes you have to wait for a commercial before you can open it and choose what you want, like things like that. We're like, oh, this is definitely this kind of upload.
Or we had masks on people in the subway in the pilot before the pandemic, and people were like, how'd you know that was coming? And it was just based on, research of air quality in the future. I actually went to MIT recently and did a little talk for them and at their media lab, and they showed me around on some of the cool things that they were working on, the futuristic things. And they actually have a device that they put on sleeping people, and it pictures what they're dreaming on a screen. And when they published something about it, the scientist who was telling me the story said that he was approached the next week by the Coors company, the beer company, that wanted to advertise backwards into people's dreams, was looking into the technology. So, it's like, it's almost impossible to come up with something that, is impossible to do. I mean, everything that we think is funny is something that somebody's working on somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not only is that bizarre, but it's slightly unsettling. And I think that's where this show lives in that space where it's so funny. It can be outrageous, but it's like, we are not that far away from that. And, because we know what we're capable of. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're trying to be entertaining. Obviously, primarily, we're trying to make it fun, but I think we're also doing something that's kind of important in terms of letting people imagine and preview some of the technological changes that are going to impact them in a few years, because there's so much unintended consequences, as we saw with Facebook, destroying journalism and democracy. These new technologies occur. And I just think it's better to be like forewarned is forearmed or something, so if we can, in an entertaining way, get people talking about it before it hits, maybe we'll be a little bit more prepared.
Yeah. My final question is for the panel, but primarily for Greg and Maxwell. And that is, as producers, you write, you create, you bring something out into the world. The worst thing that could happen is for it to be ignored. And I hear that from showrunners all the time. Your show came out a couple of months ago, season 2, and it's on 100%, staggering 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is very rare, and you should be super proud of that. But I mean, it's an obvious question, but just to end it off on a good note, how do you feel about the show being embraced in that way?
Well, I mean, I'll go first. Everything I've ever worked on that I loved has taken a long time to catch on, pretty much. King of the Hill was pretty successful out of the box, but The Office took a long time. Parks took a while. So I'm pretty sanguine. I'm pretty patient about it catching on. I'm really confident that we're doing great work. And the more we can just sort of add to it, the better it is for someone who stumbles upon the show and, has seasons and seasons to watch. That's my hope. But yeah, I'm really happy how people love it. I mean, it's like, it's exciting, and it's international too. I mean, not to, be tooting our horn here, but it's very big in all these other countries, which is very exciting. One day I'll visit them.
What about you, Maxwell? Final word for you.
Yeah, for me, I feel relief because I didn't work on season 1, which people loved, but then I would tell people like, oh yeah, I'm working on, season 2 of Upload now. And people were like, oh my God, you working on that show? We love that show so much. That show's so great. And I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And then it kept happening and it kept happening and it kept happening. And I was like, oh my God, like people are really into the show. I didn't know. We started writing season 2, before 1 even was out. So I had seen it early, but after it came out, people were going crazy for it. And so I felt, not enormous pressure, but I definitely was like, dude, don't mess this up. Like whatever influence you have in the room, just like don't mess it up. And so when season 2 hit and the reviews were good and people seemed to like it, it was like I felt relief and just was like, all right, yeah, trust your taste, like believe in yourself, you're all good.
Yeah. I can't imagine the pressure that you're under to bring something to life and hope that people see it, then even hopefully, if you're lucky, embrace it and you get to have both. And it's not only a critical success, it's also been in the top 10 for Amazon, I think, since it came out. So congrats, everybody. Really great work. And thank you, Maxwell, Greg, David, and Farnaz for your time today. I look forward to season 3. Can you please hurry up? Get back to the writers' room so we can get season 3 as soon as possible.
I'm gonna literally
Thank
right
you,
now,
Robert.
I'm gonna turn to this other computer and work.
Yeah, keep going on that script.
Yep.
All right, see you soon, Farnaz.
See you soon. Dave.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
Did good.
Thanks, Robert.
No problem. Thank you.